You know how they say, what you don't know can't hurt you? Well, they've never scrolled through Instagram at 2 a.m. and stumbled onto your wife's nightlife double feature. I wasn't looking for trouble that night. Trouble found me. It's funny how the truth always seems to show up when you least expect it, wrapped in bad lighting and shaky camera work. My name's Marcus Reed, 38, concept designer for a robotics startup. My life is all about precision and detail, every piece fitting perfectly to create something greater than the sum of its parts. My marriage to Vanessa, however, is not that. She's 34, a luxury event coordinator, and thrives on chaos. Our dynamic worked at first. She was the free spirit to my meticulous planner, the yin to my yang. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of her adventure and became more like her pit stop. Vanessa's love of nightlife wasn't new. She had always enjoyed going out with her girlfriends, clubs, cocktails, the occasional late-night Uber ride home while I worked on prototypes in the garage. I didn't mind. If anything, I envied her ability to let loose. But lately, her nights out had shifted. They weren't just once a week anymore. They were 3, sometimes 4 nights. Her friends' nights stretched into early mornings, and her stories about just drinks started sounding like bad scripts. Last Saturday, while scrolling Instagram, I got my first hint that something wasn't right. One of Vanessa's best friends, Sasha, had gone live from a club. I nearly swiped past it. Who cared about bad lighting and bass-heavy soundtracks? But I stopped when I noticed a familiar laugh in the background. Vanessa! She wasn't on camera, but her voice was unmistakable, rising above the chaos like a signal in the noise. My curiosity piqued. I kept watching. Sasha's camera finally panned to the dance floor. What I saw wasn't Vanessa. It was one of her friends kissing a shirtless man. A stripper. The camera wobbled, catching more of the group, and that's when I saw her. Vanessa, holding a drink, laughing, completely at ease. She looked different. Not like the woman I knew who meticulously planned every detail of her image. This was someone else entirely. Someone I wasn't sure I recognized. I didn't confront her right away. Maybe it was nothing, I told myself. Just a night out, just harmless fun. But the image stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Vanessa had been acting distant for months, always glued to her phone, her excuses for staying out growing thinner by the week. The video confirmed what I'd been avoiding. I needed to know more. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Her phone always face down on the table. The way she quickly swiped out of apps when I walked by. The overly rehearsed tone she used when I asked how her night was. It all started to add up, but the picture wasn't clear yet. Not until I stumbled onto something that would change everything. They say trust is the foundation of a good marriage. But what happens when that foundation starts to crack? I didn't realize it at the time, but that Instagram Live wasn't just a crack. It was the first brick falling out of a crumbling wall. And like any good engineer, I couldn't stop myself from inspecting the damage. After seeing that video, I started noticing things I'd overlooked for months. Vanessa had a habit of leaving her phone face down on the counter, but now I realized she always turned it away from me when notifications popped up. Her outfits for Just a Girl's Night had become increasingly daring, and her hangovers, once a rare Sunday annoyance, were now a twice-a-week occurrence. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was harmless. But a few nights later, I got another reminder that ignorance isn't bliss. It's just temporary. It started innocently enough. Vanessa announced she was heading out with her friends for a low-key evening. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left, as if mocking the trust one was trying so hard to hold on to. With the house to myself, I settled in for a quiet night, tinkering with a new drone design in the garage. Then, around midnight, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another live video, this time from one of Vanessa's other friends. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and there it was, a chaotic swirl of neon lights, loud music, and laughter. My eyes scanned the screen, and sure enough, there was Vanessa, holding a drink and swaying to the music. She wasn't doing anything incriminating, just dancing, smiling. But the people around her were a different story. The camera turned, capturing a group of women shouting and cheering as a shirtless man with abs chiseled like a marble statue performed an exaggerated pelvic thrust. It was another stripper, and this time, the camera didn't pan away. One of Vanessa's friends jumped into the frame, pulling the man closer and planting a sloppy kiss on his cheek. Another friend handed him cash, laughing uncontrollably. But it wasn't the stripper that made my stomach churn. It was the way Vanessa stood there, clapping and cheering, looking entirely at home in the scene. This wasn't the Vanessa I knew. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. I saved the video before it disappeared, and spent the next few days piecing together the breadcrumbs Vanessa and her friends had left behind. They weren't subtle. Between Instagram posts, tag photos, and vague captions like "Best night ever" and "Don't tell my husband, LOL," it became painfully clear that Vanessa's nights out weren't just cocktails and girl talk. It wasn't just one party. It wasn't even just one stripper. This was a pattern, an entire world of debauchery I hadn't known existed. And Vanessa was right in the center of it. One night, while she was asleep, I scrolled through her phone. It wasn't locked. She'd gotten careless, assuming I was still the clueless husband she'd married. What I found was worse than I expected. Messages and group chats with her friends revealed inside jokes about private rooms, birthday dances, and keeping secrets. My heart pounded as I read one exchange where a friend Sasha mentioned, "Vanessa always gets the best pick of the group." The best pick of what? I didn't want to imagine. But the final blow came when I found a set of photos buried deep in her hidden folder. One showed her sitting on a velvet couch, a glass of champagne in her hand. Beside her was another man, not the shirtless stripper, but a different guy, just as smug, his hand resting on her thigh. The caption beneath it read, "VIP treatment." That was it. The cracks had become a gaping hole, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Vanessa wasn't just out with her friends. She was living an entirely different life, one she had carefully hidden from me for years. But now, I wasn't just a husband. I was a man with a plan. They say curiosity killed the cat, but they never mention what curiosity does to a husband teetering on the edge of betrayal. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. Vanessa's double life was like a thread dangling from an expensive suit, and I couldn't resist pulling. After planting the GPS tracker, the patterns became clear. Her so-called girls' nights always ended in places that didn't match her stories. High-end clubs, boutique hotels, and, on one occasion, a secluded private estate. Each ping from the tracker fueled my resolve. But the biggest revelation came when I stumbled upon Sasha's Instagram again. One of Sasha's blurry, drunken stories caught my attention. It wasn't just the usual dancing or cocktails. This time, it was a full-blown debauchery reel. Women laughing, dollar bills scattered on the floor, and a male dancer twirling provocatively in the background. As the camera panned, Vanessa came into view, raising a glass as she leaned into the dancer. Her body language was intimate, too familiar, and the look on her face wasn't the expression of someone just enjoying a night out. It was the look of someone living a secret life. I saved the story before it disappeared, my hands shaking as I stared at the screen. This wasn't an innocent mistake. Vanessa wasn't just caught up in the moment, she was part of it. I decided to confront her in my own way. Not directly, not yet. That night, as she got ready for another low-key outing, I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about her nightlife habits. She paused, her lipstick poised midair. "You've been going out a lot lately," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Must be nice to unwind." She smiled at me through the mirror, her reflection unreadable. "It's just harmless fun," she replied. "You know how Sasha and the girls are. Harmless." That word hung in the air like smoke, choking any response I might have made. Instead, I nodded, pretending to buy in her narrative. I needed her to think she was still in control. When she left that evening, I waited 30 minutes before checking the GPS. Sure enough, she wasn't at the restaurant she'd mentioned earlier. Her car was parked outside a private club in a part of town I rarely ventured into. I made the impulsive decision to drive there myself, parking a block away and walking to the venue. The club was exclusive, its entrance guarded by a bouncer who looked like he could bench press a truck. Through the frosted glass doors, I caught glimpses of flashing lights and heard the thrum of bass-heavy music. I didn't need to go inside to know what kind of place this was. It reeked of champagne-fueled secrets and whispered indiscretions. I lingered in the shadows, scrolling through Vanessa's social media, hoping for another clue. Then, as if on cue, Sasha posted a new story. This time, the video was clearer. A velvet-curtained room, dim lighting, and Vanessa sitting on a plush couch with a drink in her hand. The male dancer from earlier leaned in, whispering something into her ear, and she laughed, a laugh I hadn't heard in months. I saved the video, my blood boiling. This wasn't just harmless fun. This was betrayal, as bold and brazen as it gets. I didn't confront her when she got home. Instead, I played my part, pretending to be the oblivious husband she thought I was. But in my mind, the pieces of my plan were starting to come together. I wasn't just going to call her out. I was going to make sure she understood exactly what it felt like to have your trust shattered. And Vanessa? She had no idea what was coming. Betrayal has a way of sharpening the mind. Every lie Vanessa told, every blurry Instagram story, every receipt tucked away in her purse became fuel for the trap I was crafting. If she wanted to play her game, I was going to rewrite the rules, and this time, I'd be the one dealing the cards. I spent the next week quietly assembling my arsenal. I started with the GPS logs, cross-referencing her movements with timestamps from photos and videos I'd saved. It was almost poetic how her carelessness had built the very case that would destroy her. The receipts she thought she discarded in the trash? I had them. The flirty messages buried deep in her phone, screenshotted and saved. And the piece de resistance, the video of her lounging with a male dancer in a velvet-curtained room, laughing as if she didn't have a husband waiting at home. That one would be the match to light the fire. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I wanted Vanessa to see the full weight of her deceit reflected back at her. She had created a world of secrets and shadows, and now I would drag it all into the light. The first phase of my plan was subtle. Let her feel safe. I played the part of the oblivious husband perfectly. I asked her how her nights out were, smiled when she gave vague answers, and even offered to pick up the tab for her girls' dinner one Friday night. She was so deep in her web of lies that she didn't even flinch. To her, I was still the naive husband who worked late and didn't ask questions. But beneath the surface, every move she made was another step into the trap I was setting. The second phase required a little help. I contacted Sasha anonymously through a burner account, posing as a fan of her social media content. A few flattering messages and carefully phrased questions later, I got what I needed: confirmation of Vanessa's next big night out. Sasha was too drunk on attention to suspect anything and casually mentioned a private party they'd be attending that weekend. It was perfect. On the night of the party, Vanessa was all smiles as she got ready. Her dress was sleek, black, and barely there, a showstopper for an audience I wasn't invited to. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, her perfume lingering in the air like a taunt. I waited until her car was safely out of the driveway before making my move. The location was a swanky penthouse downtown, the kind you only get into if your name is on the list or your wallet's heavy enough to buy silence. I wasn't interested in sneaking in. Instead, I positioned myself strategically, armed with a camera and a clear view of the balcony, where the party's more intimate moments tended to spill over. Sure enough, within an hour, Vanessa appeared. She was laughing. Her drink held high as a man I didn't recognize leaned in close. His hand brushed against her back, and she didn't pull away. They moved toward the edge of the balcony, the city lights casting them in silhouette. It wasn't just flirtation. It was confirmation. I filmed everything. This wasn't just about having proof. It was about creating the perfect storm. Once I had what I needed, I slipped away, unseen and unnoticed. Vanessa's world was about to collapse, and she wouldn't even see it coming. The final phase of my plan was the most satisfying: delivery. Over the next few days, I quietly distributed the evidence to everyone in her circle. Her friends, her colleagues, even her parents received carefully curated packages of screenshots, videos, and receipts. The reactions were instant and explosive. Her friends began distancing themselves, her colleagues whispered behind her back, and her mother left a tearful voicemail begging her to call. Vanessa didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The whispers turned into confrontations, and the lies she'd spent years building unraveled in a matter of days. And me? I didn't stick around for the fallout. I left her a single envelope on the kitchen counter, containing divorce papers and a USB drive with all the evidence. The note inside was simple. You wanted to live a double life. Now you can. There's something poetic about watching a carefully constructed house of lies collapse. When Vanessa finally realized the full extent of what I'd done, it wasn't just her world that crumbled. It was the illusion she'd so painstakingly crafted. And I didn't have to lift a finger. The evidence spoke for itself. I didn't stick around to see her reaction to the envelope I'd left on the counter. By the time she came home from her girls' night, likely still buzzing from the party, I was gone. I'd packed my essentials, locked my phone, and left the rest behind. The house was hers now, though I doubted it would feel like home after what she was about to discover. The next day, the messages started rolling in. My inbox and voicemail were flooded with a mix of disbelief, fury, and pleas for explanations. Vanessa's friends were in chaos. Sasha posted a cryptic Instagram story about fake people ruining lives, while another of her party crew declared she was taking a social media detox. It was all too predictable. The same women who had cheered Vanessa on during her escapades were now scrambling to protect their own reputations. But Vanessa? She didn't post anything. She didn't call or text me either. For once, she was silent. Meanwhile, I moved on to the next stage of my plan. It wasn't enough to expose Vanessa's lies to her friends and family. I wanted her to feel the weight of every choice she had made. And what better way than to cut off the lifeline she had relied on for years? First, I contacted our landlord and terminated the lease on our house. I had already lined up a place for myself, so Vanessa had 30 days to figure out her next move. Then I transferred all joint accounts into my name, legally, of course. Vanessa had contributed nothing to those accounts in years, and I wasn't about to let her use my money to rebuild the empire she'd destroyed. Next came her professional life. Vanessa's job as a luxury event coordinator relied heavily on her image. She was known as a charismatic, polished professional who could charm even the most difficult clients. So, I sent an anonymous email to her company with a sample of the evidence I'd collected. Just enough to raise eyebrows, but not enough to get me sued. It wasn't about revenge, it was about honesty. Shouldn't her clients know the kind of person handling their events? The final blow came when I reached out to Vanessa's parents. They had always been kind to me, supportive of our marriage, and completely unaware of their daughter's double life. I didn't embellish or dramatize. I simply forwarded the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions. Within hours, her mother called me, sobbing. "We had no idea," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know who she is anymore." Neither did I. 2 weeks after the envelope, I got an unexpected email from Vanessa. The subject line read, "You win." In the message, she admitted defeat. She didn't apologize. Not really. She called me cruel, vindictive, and calculating to the point of sociopathy. But she didn't deny a single thing. Her arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only anger and humiliation. "I hope you're happy," she wrote. "You've destroyed everything." I stared at the screen, the words echoing in my mind. She still didn't get it. I hadn't destroyed anything. She had. I just made sure she couldn't hide from it anymore. The next time I heard about Vanessa, it was through a mutual acquaintance. She had moved into a friend's spare room, lost her job, and was trying to piece together a new version of herself. The glamorous, carefree woman I once knew was gone, replaced by someone desperate and lost. And me? I was finally free. I poured myself into work, finding solace in the precise, predictable world of robotics. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weighed down by suspicion and doubt. I could breathe again. Every now and then, I'd think about Vanessa, about the woman I married and the stranger she became. There was no satisfaction in her downfall, no joy in her misery. But there was peace in knowing I'd walked away with my dignity intact, while she was left to reckon with the choices she made. Months turned into a year, and the chaos that had once defined my life with Vanessa became nothing more than a distant memory. I had moved on, new apartment, new projects, and new sense of clarity. The bitterness I once felt toward her had dulled, replaced by a quiet acceptance of what she had done and the person she had chosen to become. Then one day, while grabbing a coffee at my usual spot, I ran into an old mutual acquaintance, Claire. She wasn't particularly close to either of us, but knew enough to have been a spectator to the fallout. As we exchanged pleasantries, her tone shifted, and she hesitated before saying, "Have you heard about Vanessa?" I shook my head, unsure if I even wanted to know. "No, we haven't spoken since everything." Claire's expression was a mix of pity and awkwardness, the kind of look people give when they're about to deliver bad news. "She's not doing well, Marcus. I ran into her a few weeks ago. She looked rough." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to elaborate. "She's been drinking. A lot. Lost her place. Lost her job. And honestly, she didn't seem like herself. She was rambling about how everything fell apart, blaming the world, blaming." Claire stopped, her cheeks reddening. "Well, blaming you." I laughed bitterly, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Of course, she blamed me. People like Vanessa don't take accountability. They rewrite the narrative to make themselves the victim. Curiosity got the better of me that night. Against my better judgment, I checked Vanessa's social media. Her once polished Instagram, filled with photos of cocktails, designer outfits, and elaborate events, had devolved into sporadic, disjointed posts. Blurry selfies in dimly lit bars, cryptic captions about starting over, and the occasional rant about betrayal. Her follower count had plummeted, and the comments, once filled with admiration, were now either pitying or absent altogether. It was clear her life had taken a steep decline. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop wondering about her. Despite everything she had done, there was a part of me, however small, that still cared. Not for the woman who betrayed me, but for the person she used to be. The Vanessa I had fallen in love with years ago. Eventually, I heard from Claire again. This time, the news was even darker. "She's been banned from a few bars downtown," she told me. "And I heard she got arrested for public intoxication a while back. Her friends, well, I don't think they're in the picture anymore." The image of Vanessa, once so vibrant and full of life, reduced to this shadow of herself, stirred something inside me. Not regret, not pity, just a profound sense of finality. I had walked away from the wreckage she created, but she hadn't. She was still living in it, buried under the weight of her own decisions. One rainy evening, I got a message from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Vanessa. I need to talk to you. Please." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. My first instinct was to ignore it. What good could come from reopening that chapter of my life? But something in her words, or maybe just in my own lingering curiosity, pushed me to reply. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. She arrived late, her once perfect appearance replaced by someone who looked years older than her age. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes tired, and her hands trembled as she sipped the coffee the waitress brought her. "I don't even know why I'm here," she said, her voice shaky. I don't have anyone else." I didn't say anything. I let her talk, her words tumbling out in a messy stream of apologies, excuses, and self-pity. She blamed the drinking on loneliness, the job loss on circumstances, and the estrangement from her friends on misunderstandings. But underneath it all, there was a flicker of something real, an acknowledgement, however faint, that she had done this to herself. "I know you'll never forgive me," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed you to know. I hate the person I've become." For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for her, but for what could have been, for the life we might have had if she had made different choices. But that life was gone, and so was the man who would have fought for it. "You're right," I said evenly. "I won't forgive you, but I hope you find a way to forgive yourself." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stay to watch them fall. I paid the bill, stood up, and left the diner without looking back. The rain soaked through my jacket as I walked to my car, but I felt lighter than I had in years.